Good afternoon. Welcome to another exciting episode of In the Stacks by the Sea. We're here at the Waccamaw Library, part of the Georgetown County Library System in beautiful Pawleys Island, South Carolina, where it's raining today, but spring has almost sprung, so it's going to be beautiful tomorrow, and it's getting there. But we have a delightful guest with us, Dr. Amy Murrell Taylor. And Amy is a prominent, award-winning historian of the American Civil War. She is Theodore A. Hallam Professor in History at the University of Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. Her most recent book, Embattled Freedom, journeys through the Civil War's slave refugee camps from UNC Press, has won awards from the Organization of American Historians, the Society of Civil War Historians, and the Center for Civil War History, as well as Yale University's Frederick Douglass Book Prize. All very prestigious, highly coveted awards. In addition to her many academic accomplishments, she is married to Dr. Scott Taylor, shout out to him, an excellent historian in his own right. And above all, Amy is super mama to two awesome possum thriving daughters, arguably, as I said earlier, the best in the universe today. And she's good people on top of all that. So Amy Murrell Taylor is here with us today. First question, and really the main reason we brought you here today to In the Stacks by the Sea. Murrell's Inlet, 2 miles from us right here in Pawleys Island. Murrell's Inlet, the seafood capital of South Carolina. You're Amy Murrell Taylor. Mm-hmm. Is Murrell's Inlet named for you?
Good question. If I say yes, do I get some claim on like some land here or something?
It could be all yours.
Yeah.
You're a historian. You could probably, look into some documents,
Yeah.
make that happen.
I need to make that happen. But as far as I know, my roots go back to North Carolina, but I haven't traced them to South Carolina.
Okay.
So.
I think it's kind of ambiguous. There's like maybe a Captain John Murrell,
Yeah.
But it's not really, I don't think it's hard and fast who it's named after, so you could probably make a claim.
Okay, I'll try to do that.
Yeah.
That could pave the way for my future.
Yeah. Well, your dad's coming in, so
Yes, the Murrell that I descend from. Yeah.
Later today, so.
There's some colorful Murrells in our past. I mean, there's the Captain John, there's this land raider that was in Missouri and Arkansas at one point.
Okay.
So.
That's getting close.
Yeah.
Could have come down to the coast, and so there might still be a chance that you could lay claim to Murrell's Inlet. It's not that big a place.
I'm gonna try.
So, yeah, that would be good. So it's a good start. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your new book, Embattled Freedom? It's won so many awards.
Yeah, you're so kind to. First of all, thank you for your kind introduction.
Oh.
You kind of left me speechless, so I don't know how I'm going to be able to describe my book. But so Embattled Freedom is, I like to say, it's a story of how slavery broke down in the Civil War. But it shifts our attention away from Lincoln, not to do any disrespect to Lincoln. He's still important.
He's gotten a lot of press.
Shifts the attention away from him to what enslaved people themselves were doing to free themselves. And they were doing a lot. And what I write about in the book is about how 500,000 of them, fled slavery. They took to the region's roads and waterways and went to the Union Army and set up whole new livelihoods for themselves in new camps. And that's really, to me, the story of emancipation. And so that's the story I try to tell in the book.
Yeah. And we've had that kind of, a lot of that big history, and you talked a little bit about that, but, Abe Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant and all the big battles and, the war history and, so much of that has been gone over, and that's kind of the Civil War history that I got growing up. But you're telling a different side of the history that's just as important, equally important, but it gives us a much, maybe a deeper understanding.
I hope so. I mean, I'm one of those historians who thinks that everybody in the past made an impact. But the way American historians and teachers, for a long time, we've told the story of the American past as political and military leaders. People in visible positions of power, they were the ones who determined the course of history. And when it turns out that, they are very important, but they're often interacting with and working in concert with people we've never heard of. Average, ordinary people who are making change for themselves. And so that's kind of how I've always approached history. But this book in particular, I really wanted to make sure that we recognize the enslaved people. I mean, they were taking enormous risks, putting their lives on the line to secure freedom for themselves and their family. I mean, a huge part of our nation's history of freedom is in their actions, I think.
Yeah, we talk a lot about freedom a whole lot about freedom in the abstract, and it's a major talking point today, and the promise of America. And this is a book all about embattled freedom. It was embattled at that time, but for 500,000 people, they were give me liberty or give me death. They were living that. It was they were willing to die for freedom.
And I think that sometimes the way we tell the history of freedom in this country is that it's just kind of like this inevitable thing that evolved and just, it's like the powers that be just kind of pushed it forward. But the story is far more crooked and full of setbacks. And in this case, freedom had to be truly fought for. They had to fight in so many ways every day. So freedom didn't just come.
It wasn't, signed a document.
Right.
The documents had to be signed. Abe Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, but people had to live that and risk death behind enemy lines.
Well, the thing is, something like the Emancipation, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
it's
something like the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't going to mean anything until enslaved people went out and claimed the freedom it promised. When Lincoln issued that, it's not like Confederate slave owners are suddenly going to say, oh, Lincoln said we should free the slaves. Okay, no. So, it wasn't going to mean anything without the actions of enslaved people.
And so that, that understory, those hidden stories and buried stories of, all these hundreds of thousands of enslaved people who had to go up and battle for their freedom behind the battle lines. They didn't get the big, the biographies and autobiographies, most of them, but how did you get their stories?
Yeah, that's the big challenge of writing this book. And I kind of envision myself as a historian who's like a detective, so I was really up for this challenge. Where were the little fragments of evidence I could find? But this is not a population that wrote memoirs like Grant did. It's not a population that left many writings at all behind, because many of them could not write. And there weren't publishing houses that were wanting to publish what they did write if they did. So, things haven't survived. So what I did instead was I thought about who did they come into contact with. And they came into contact with the Army, and they came in contact with Northern missionaries who were coming into the South to help them. And so I started looking at the records kept by the Army and the missionaries. And the Army records in particular are really fascinating. The Army was really thorough and meticulous in its record keeping. And so I could find a particular person in this record in this place one day, and then they're in a labor record over here another day, they're in a record of food rations issued over here. And I just started connecting the dots of people's stories. And as I like to say, I kind of imagine myself like a follower of their movements. And what do their movements tell us? What were they trying to do?
So that was intensive research.
It was like 2 years
Yeah.
of in the archives.
Just in the archives, piecing together these stories, and
Yeah.
and and another. You read a couple of passages for us today, and tell us a little bit about your approach. You did follow. You were like a detective, and you followed individuals around.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to do that from the very beginning. I knew I wanted to find some individuals and follow them. Because when this history has been talked about in the past, it was talked about as like, this is a collective, a flood, a rising tide. Like, these people were talked about in the aggregate. And I wanted to make them less anonymous and get to know some people. So I set out from the very beginning to follow individuals, because I also think I wanted to know what it was like to experience this, living in Union Army lines for several years. What is that like? Well, when you follow an individual, you get at kind of the day-to-dayness of their lives. So it was a challenge, for the reasons I said before, to piece together their stories. But I did it for a few people. And then the challenge became, how do I write? I wanted to write the full history and write their histories. And putting those two things together was a little bit challenging as I was writing. But I was determined I wanted this to be a book that gave you the big picture, gave you everything, but also gave you the depth of individual lives.
Yeah, and the way you put it together too, and you can hear it in those passages, and we might you didn't bring a copy of the book, as you confessed.
I could pull out my laptop
and
read.
because we might do that, because the way you write is they're beautifully written, and you have it's the skills of a creative writer, which is
wow, thank you.
Not always the
Gosh.
The forte of a historian, which
Right.
is typically the more objectively written in the facts and getting all those dates down. But that's the other side of your approach, is really to make it to flesh out these lives in that kind of in a gripping storyline. You give them, which I think is another way of honoring their lives in the past, to make it to give it more substance and to make those lives really count. You really envision them and give them a storyline, a narrative.
Yeah.
What was behind that choice? Why did you?
I think it goes back to my desire to understand what is this like. And I soon realized that their experiences during the war were constantly changing and full of setbacks. And I guess I wanted the reader to kind of experience that as much as they could for themselves. So, Edward and Emma Whitehurst, there's like their story begins, they create a store, and it's like they're becoming independent proprietors. It's like the American dream. And then it gets pulled away. I don't want to give it all away here, but, soldiers ransack it. And I guess I wanted readers to experience that sort of like, that gut punch. Because that is truly the story of how people became free. It was not easy. It was not a linear path from slavery to freedom. So it's part about, I guess, getting the reader to experience what they experienced as much as I could.
There's empathy. Empathy is created. It's not just it's not just intellectual, or there's that part of the history that we understand with our heads, but you also kind of get us in the hearts, I guess, too.
Well, thank you. That's what you try to do, but it's not always easy, especially when there's so many holes in their stories, too. Yeah. And they just have to kind of be there and linger.
And you recognize these people going through, this is what freedom is. Freedom is messy.
Yes.
It's not.
It's chaos.
You get, you're free. You finally earn it, and then bad things happen to good people. And it's a struggle.
It's a struggle. Exactly right. Yeah.
It continues. So, and even the physical survival of of embattled freedom going along with the troops. It's that's, you know, in other cases that's with Eliza in physical danger. That's, you know, that's
because
that's not the same as what we, you know, typically think of as freedom, but her own, you know, physical security is in danger.
Their paths to freedom wound through combat. You know, before the Civil War, somebody who wanted to become free, they just had to get as far away as possible into the North. You know, and they're going to a relatively peaceful place, not 100%. But what changes in the Civil War is to become free, you have to get yourself right into the war zone. You got to find the armies. And so it's a very different experience of becoming free, and all the risks. I mean, everything from, you know, violence itself to the disease and the illness that are, you know, raging through the armies. You know, you have to basically be willing to confront all of that to have any chance of becoming free. It's really stunning when you stop and think about it. Even after I've written this book, I'm still stunned that they do it.
So it is a very hard fought freedom, hard fought and well earned. And so, you know, we were the issue of monuments sort of came up at the end of the talk in the Q&A, but that's something that are there any monuments out there to these refugees? Or
so
to the
that's
camps?
an interesting question. You know, for so long, people didn't even barely know this. Well, most people didn't really know this history existed. But descendants of those who fled during the war did. You know, this is history passed down in the family. And it's been in the last like 10 to 15 years that in a number of the places where people fled during the war, where there were these refugee camps, descendants have been hard at work to try to preserve the spaces. There are no buildings to preserve. Those were all, that's a long story too, but they were all destroyed. So it's just the land itself. But even then, we've had efforts to try to create something on that land to remember this history. So perfect examples here in South Carolina on Hilton Head Island, Mitchellville, where the community there has created the Mitchellville Preservation Project, which has opened up a park on the site. And they do a lot of programming there, and it's really becoming a sort of a place to go to learn about this history. So that's a wonderful way to memorialize and remember. We see similar things going on in Helena, Arkansas. Camp Nelson, Kentucky, and Fort Monroe started off as community efforts, and now they've been declared national monuments, and the National Park Service is coming in. But this is all in like the last 10 to 15 years. It's all really recent. But we these descendant communities, we owe them a lot of debt and thanks for making sure this history is not forgotten.
Sticking with the stories. Keeping them alive. And especially with the lack of a written narrative, or much of one, that they didn't have the control over that, but the oral stories kind of continue until you put it together nicely in this book, Embattled Freedom. And when you were showing the images of some of the refugee camps, it almost looked like enslaved quarters. It was kind of eerie to go through all this and escape from enslavement, and then it almost looks like the repetition.
So I thought that too when I saw some of those pictures, and I thought, gosh, did they really did freedom really look any different? But then I started to realize that maybe the physical structure is roughly the same, but the meaning attached to it is very different. It's a totally different kind of space, and it's one where families can reunite and come together, where they can worship freely in a way they hadn't before. So the meaning around it really does change, and to the point where there's a great hope that they don't have to lose these houses. They really want to hold on to them at the end.
And you talked about it was crushing at times when they had to get out of, move along. There were sometimes it was forced because of the battle would move in, or
Yeah, I mean, that's
a
another one of those
disaster
like
or
gut
something
punch
else.
moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, where suddenly camp has to be evacuated because that's just what's happening in the war. It's forcing them to evacuate. The Union's getting up and moving. They got to move too. And, a house they've built or a garden they've planted has to be
Gardens.
abandoned suddenly,
Yeah, so
Mhm.
so there was, even though the huts might have visually kind of rhymed with the past, the
Yeah.
enslaved past, there was ownership.
Yeah.
It was definitely
Yeah,
a hard-won
and-
move forward.
And I think that on the houses, and some archaeologists have done some good work in some places on this too, but there's some details about the houses, even if the sizes are not that big, there's some details that are a little bit different. I write about in the book, when they're building these houses, there's often involvement of white military officials and missionaries, and they have their own ideas of how these things should be built. And one of the things that some of them want is to make sure there are windows on these houses. And they think that's good for public health, for air circulation, and this and that. But in some places, some of these refugees do not want windows.
Really?
And it becomes like a clash. It's so interesting. There were these Philadelphia Quakers who were working in Virginia, and they wanted windows, and the refugees said no, and they still ordered like 500 window sashes sent to Virginia to be put in these houses. And that was an interesting moment to me, where you can see some of these formerly enslaved people, taking some control over the houses, and why they don't want windows. Well, there's issues of privacy that they're claiming now that they may not have had before. There's safety and security in that. This is a war. There are Confederate guerrillas looming, and they feel a little more secure sometimes without a window. So, so in some ways, even just the physical, the architectural details, you could say, of the houses are a little bit different than under slavery, and have different, unique meaning in the war.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, we have this. They started out as the slaves legally defined as contraband. You mentioned, in order, confiscated property by the Union general in order to, I guess, to make it acceptable to be able to carry them away from slaveholders. So that was the legal, term used, property seized during the war. But that term was changed over into refugee. Obviously more humanizing, but still, we still keep running into, I guess, refugee crises today.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's, this book seems timely on a number of levels, with, public health. We were talking about public health crisis and other things, but any resonance with the refugee matters today?
So interesting. I started this book in 2008. And of course, there were refugee crises then, but Americans' attention to them was not as strong as it is today. Okay, let's just put it that way. And I felt as I was working on this book that, the distance between past and present was like closing up.
Yeah.
And I couldn't kind of believe it at times. But I think, the book shows that the United States has a long history with refugees, even going before the Civil War. And this is not just a 21st century phenomenon. It also captures a moment in American history when we were still kind of defining what a refugee was and what the United States obligation was to them. Those are things that got worked out in the 20th century, particularly after World War II, with the help of the UN, defining a refugee a certain way. So things are kind of fluid and in flux. It's an early moment, but I feel like, I've been asked before, what can this book then do for us today, given this crisis? And, I'm still working through that question, but I think one of the things I wanted to do in the book, which we've sort of talked about already, is remember that this is not just an abstract issue, but these are people who are living this day to day. And I think that's a message that applies today too. We get caught up in the politics and talking about the policy as an abstraction. And I think it's helpful to remember that there are people living this. And I think it gives us a different kind of empathy and different perspective on working through the problems.
Oh yeah, and absolutely, your book does. It's not this record of facts and figures and clerks. An army clerk's register. It is you do flesh it out. It is. It's almost like you can read it almost as a novel, or short stories.
Wow, thank you.
So it has that power to it. So you can feel it. So I think that is a good. That's an important resonance
Thank you.
with today.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah. And it did. You mentioned 2008. It was this. You built a database to trace. Digital historian. That's one of your many strengths. But you were on the forefront of that whole movement. And you built a database to trace the enslaved refugees going to freedom and all this. So you've been in archives, 2 years spent in archives, and then the whole writing
Actually,
process.
I guess it was even more than 2 years now that I think about it. But yeah.
It's a lot of time.
Yeah,
And
it was a lot of time.
Archives, I've spent my little time in literary archives, but it's amateur hour compared to you. They're fun when you first get in there, but it's the charm might wear off after a bit.
I looked at hundreds of boxes full of material, and a lot of it, some of it's just boring, kind of routine sort of stuff. But then you find something that really gives you this little nugget that opens everything up, and makes it all worthwhile. So I got very familiar with the National Archives.
I'll
working
never
on this book.
Forgive Robert Penn Warren for his handwriting. It's it's not even bad handwriting. It's just kind of inscrutable. You just, I don't know what he's, but it's,
And you know what happens when you have bad handwriting? Then we can't read it, and that sort of messes up your place in your legacy and your, place in history. So we should all have good handwriting.
Yes. That's, as I clearly do not.
Yeah.
But luckily, nobody's keeping an archive of this.
I can see there's your logic to that, but it escapes me.
No one else will.
Yeah.
This is your talk. If anyone just wants to look at this, Luckily, we have it recorded on video, so they won't have to rely on my notes. You did mention throughout there were South Carolina local connections and coastal South Carolina, and interestingly, there was kind of a vacuum created when after General Drayton was defeated on the South Carolina coast. So he was a planter as well, Confederate general, but and then so it became a magnet. The coastal area, Hilton Head Island area, and so formerly enslaved African Americans came down to the coast.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you were in parts of Georgia, South Carolina, even parts of North Carolina, and you wanted to claim this freedom that you're hearing the Union Army is fighting for, that was, in your area, that was the place to go, were those islands right there. And Hilton Head is one I write about, but, and, if you go there, you're going to find settlements of other people just like you and the Union Army. It's roughly what you're going to find there. So, the whole sort of makeup of who's living there and what it all looks like really kind of shifts quickly, just beginning really around the fall of 1861.
So, and early on in a remarkable transformation that quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, an important book, and as I said, major prizes, and you've been going all over. I mentioned you New York, Philadelphia, Waccamaw Library, And I mean, that's just to name a few highlights, but you've been on
This is the most
kind
fun.
of a world tour.
The Lever is the
Thank
most
you
fun.
for saying that.
Yes.
On the record.
Yeah.
For many in New York and Philadelphia will see that once this
Nothing
goes
like South
live.
Carolina hospitality.
Yes, it's great. And we'll get some good weather for the rest of your stay
Okay,
here
good.
too.
Good.
So you can see.
It's okay. It's already warmer than I'm used to.
Yeah.
I'll take the warmth, even if it's raining.
It will be bright and sunny, and I know your dad's going to do some bird watching
Yes.
at Huntington
Yeah.
Beach State Park, and maybe possibly find the old deed to
Find that
to
Murrell,
Murrell's Inlet
that Murrell land that we
he
can
owns.
claim.
Yes.
I'll set him to work on that.
So, did I ask you a question? I don't.
Did you?
You'd answered the question. I was talking about all the. The question was, when you win these awards, do you actually get a trophy of some kind, or a plaque, or
Oh my
a
gosh.
ribbon,
I'm gonna start blushing.
or
Well, I've been very fortunate that a certificate, a bowl,
a bowl is nice.
and sometimes a cash prize too. But I've been fortunate. There have been some nice award ceremonies
Yes.
that I've been able to go to. I was just at one in New York. That was for the Frederick Douglass Prize that Yale administers,
It's a
and
big
they
one.
brought in like 150 high school students from New York City.
Wow.
To be a part of it, and their teachers, and I did a 45-minute sort of Q&A with them, and they asked some of the best questions I've gotten. I mean, yours are great too,
Thank you.
but the high school students were pretty amazing, as I'm sure you would expect. And so that was a fun, meaningful way to celebrate.
Yeah.
But all of that stuff, I mean, you write a book, you know this, you write a book, you just want people to read it. And then for there to be recognition on top of that is, I guess that means more people will read it, and that's the best part. Better than a
Absolutely.
trophy.
Well,
You like trophies?
Trophies are nice. Trophies are very nice, but although I still have the certificate when Scott and I coached the
Oh.
Katie and Rangeley in the soccer league in Albany.
Oh, do
Yeah.
you? Oh.
Yeah.
Do you have it framed? Like on the wall?
It's on the wall. It's just
Oh.
pinned
Okay.
to the board on the wall.
Okay.
It wasn't framed, but
Uh-huh.
I probably should have it framed. But
Yeah.
it was a great
I don't know.
championship
Scott may have
season.
lost his. Lost. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
I would hate to hear that.
That was
'cause it
nice that you saved it.
It was a great season.
Yeah, it was.
Lives on. But it's nice that you have your awards too.
It is very nice.
Yes, we all have awards. That's my point.
Yeah.
We all have done great things.
Everybody needs appreciation.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Albany under 7 soccer league championship, and the Yale
Hugely important.
University's Frederick Douglass Book Prize. I mean,
Yeah, but think about the
They're
impact
all-
you had
they're
on
all
all those
important.
under 7-year-olds.
that's true. Yes,
It's still with them. That's huge.
Possibly, although Scott just recycled his
Well,
printer.
I don't know.
ready.
He's going to watch this and be like, I have it. I've had it the whole time.
He probably still does. So, no, it is. That's a great. I mean, that's a major. All these are important awards, and you're just, you're like the Ben-Hur
Oh my God.
of 2019, 2020. So.
Oh, please. All right.
But to focus back again, you earned your BA at Duke, PhD at Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
You're at the University of Kentucky now. So obviously, you make your important life decisions based on
Basketball?
basketball. Essentially, they're all basketball schools. So
Yeah.
which
Which is dicey. I mean, I
Yeah.
moved to Kentucky. They hate Duke.
yeah,
So I've had to keep that kind of on the DL
You-
a little bit.
I mean, yeah. Where else you can go to Chapel Hill next, and then
Yeah.
they hate Duke, so or Kansas, I guess. But that's pretty
Yeah.
much it. You've gone to all the major stops now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, that means
Yeah.
the next month or so is going to be a little fun for me.
yeah, March Madness.
It's
so.
coming.
But you have a good balance between that work-life balance, because you do high-powered academic at the highest level, but also a mom and a spouse, and 2 great daughters, and a daughter and a sister, and all that too. So have any advice?
I am not in a
others?
position to give advice on this one. Balance, I don't know if I have balance. It's really hard. I'm just somebody who muddles through one day at a time, which is not to say I don't get anxious about what's coming, but I just, every day is a different. I mean, I was just texting between this talk and here, like, what are we going to do about Katie's trombone lesson? I'm not even in the same state with them. I mean, it's just...
She's still playing
I
trombone?
guess technology, she is.
That's awesome.
But I guess technology is helping in some ways to keep it all together, because I'm never fully cut off, and
Yeah.
but it's hard. It's I don't know. On the one hand, it's really hard, and I am happy to commiserate with any other person trying to balance work and life. But at the same time, when you write a book like I'm writing, and I'm writing about these people, I'm like, I have nothing to complain about.
It could be worse, yeah.
I have my family. They have not been taken from me, and I have an income, and I have a stable home. And so this project was like a reality check all the time, to just like chill out. It's all going to be fine.
It's humbling, yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, any early leads on this year's winner for the Kentucky Derby?
No, I don't even know. I haven't even seen names of horses.
You could just make one up,
Could.
like Greenbrier. Could be a horse in there.
Probably has been one. That sounds like something. But they always have like 3 different words or names,
Yeah,
it's like a
you could go
compound
with
name.
that, yeah.
So you'd have to add something to Greenbrier too, I don't know what. But yeah, I'll have a pick when the time comes. I've gotten into horse racing a little bit. I actually ride horses now.
Oh, do you?
That's my new thing.
Well, see,
That's
a whole-
work-life
that's-
balance there.
That needs to be added to the bio.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
I'm a beginner.
Wow.
I will not be competing, I will not be racing.
Okay.
But back to work-life balance. There is nothing like riding a horse to just kind of like relax you and
Wow.
clear your head.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it.
That's
It's
awesome.
not cheap though, that's part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine not, but that's a good skill to do. Yeah, that's an extra thing. So, well, yeah, that's awesome. So horseback riding, trombone playing, is, I'm sure that's relaxing to listen to in the
Well,
evenings as well.
for some reason it always starts at 10:30 at night.
Yeah, that's the best practice out.
No matter what we
Yeah.
say to encourage it earlier,
Mhm.
it always ends up right at the end of the night.
Thankfully,
Yep.
both boys have ceased playing their
Have they?
instruments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those instruments, they switched over to.
Yeah, well mine are full on
some others.
gung-ho.
That's great.
Marching band, jazz
That is-
band, all of that.
No, that's
Yeah.
excellent. But there wasn't much practice going on in our house anyway, so
Yeah.
that was the issue.
Uh-huh.
What are you working on now? Anything, or are you just resting? Well-deserved.
I don't want to say I'm
your
resting on my laurels, but I am still figuring out what my next book is, but I am starting a new digital history project. It's set in kind of the Kentucky part of the story that I write about in the book, and my students and I were going to be sort of mapping the migrations of people out of slavery, and they go to this one camp in Kentucky, but then they're moving, and I'm mapping their movements and then where they end up later in life.
Oh.
And as a way to, it's in some ways it's for the local community and for the public in Kentucky to kind of get to know some of the people again.
Oh. Wow.
But also, I think on a scholarly level, I think there's a lot going on with migration and movement that we don't quite understand and comprehend. So I'm hoping the project will help kind of advance our understanding there. But so yeah, getting into digital history again.
Oh, that's great, and a great, connected project, and sounds like it'll be, it's important work again, very vital work. So that's terrific. Any final words for the good of the order today? I always ask that. So.
Any final words? Well, just, it's, as I said before, you write a book, to have people be interested in it is like such a gift. So thank you
Oh, yeah.
so much for, a great conversation about it and having me here. And
Yeah.
we had such a wonderful audience this morning.
Yes.
The people of Pawleys Island and Murrell's Inlet, they are engaged with
Yes, they
history.
are.
So that's a wonderful
They're-
thing to see. I'd like to see that more.
Yeah,
So-
they're a good bunch. They
Yeah.
really are. So, yeah, and good to be able to bring in folks like you who are engaging and wonderful
Oh, thank you.
and have
You're a good friend.
great things to say. So, good stuff. Well, Dr. Amy Murrell Taylor here with us, and we delight to have and love to have her back again. In fact, you had a couple of offers
Oh.
before the show today to come back to the area and give a couple more talks. So we might see her again.
Yeah. It's like
we'd
going on
love to-
vacation to give a talk.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the idea.
Awesome.
So, great stuff, and that's it for today from In the Stacks by the Sea.
Come inside. Come inside. Come inside.